Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder, where we unravel the secrets hidden in plain sight within company filings. Today we're diving into Perfect Moment Limited. Latest report, and let's just say it's a tale of new beginnings, or maybe just a moment of needing some quick cash. This is Perfect Moment Limited, a company we've seen before, and they've just announced a securities purchase agreement. Think of it like this: they're selling a piece of their company to get money, and they're doing it in a specific way that will break down. The big news here happened on August 27th, 2025. This report is a snapshot of what happened on that day. Now, a bit about Perfect Moment stock. They've got common stock, which is basically a basic ownership unit in the company. The par value is a tiny amount, $U is a tiny amount, which is mostly a legal technicality. And this stock is traded on the NYSE American. That's a real stock exchange, meaning regular people and big investors can buy and sell this stock. Interestingly, Perfect Moment says it's an emerging growth company. This means they're a younger company and get to follow some simpler rules for reporting their finances. They've checked the box saying they are indeed one. They've also chosen not to take advantage of a special rule allowing them to delay adopting new accounting rules. This often means they want to look as up to date as possible in their reporting. The core of this filing is about a deal they made. They entered into a securities purchase agreement. This is a fancy way of saying they've signed a serious contract to sell some of their company's value. The buyer in this deal is a group called X3 Higher Moment Fund LLC. They're buying two things from Perfect Moment. First, they're buying over 3.1 million shares of Perfect Moment's common stock. Think of these shares as small ownership slices of the company. Second, they're getting a warrant. A warrant is like a coupon that gives the buyer the right, but not the obligation, to buy more shares in the future at a set price. In this case, it's the right to buy over 3.2 million more shares. Both the price for the shares they bought right away and the price they could pay later for the warrant shares is set at 0.468222 toes per share. They actually arrived at this price by looking at the average closing price of their stock on the NYSE American for the 5 days before they signed the deal. This is a common practice, aiming for a price that reflects recent market value. So for all these shares and the warrant, Perfect Moment received a total of about $1.48 million. This is the cash they brought in from this transaction, which is a pretty significant amount for a company of this size. This agreement, like most serious contracts, has all the usual clauses. The company makes promises about its business, there are conditions that need to be met for the deal to be final, and obligations for both sides. Standard stuff for a transaction like this. Now, this next part is important. They sold these shares using an exemption from the usual, more complicated registration process required by the Securities Act. This exemption, called Section 4 centillion, is typically for private placements, meaning they weren't selling to the general public but to a specific sophisticated investor. This is a key detail because it means they didn't have to go through all the hoops of registering these shares with the government for a public offering. To go along with this deal, they also signed a registration rights agreement. This means they've promised the investor that they will eventually register these shares with the proper authorities so they can be freely traded on the open market without these private sale restrictions. This is good for the investor because it makes their investment more liquid. This section just confirms what we already discussed. They sold equity, meaning ownership pieces of the company, and they did it without the standard public registration. It basically ties back to the previous point, reinforcing that this was a private sale of stock. This part is about how they are communicating this news. Regulation FD, or fair disclosure, means that when public companies release material, information is available to everyone, not just a select few. So on the same day they made the deal, they put out a press release to announce it. This is how they make sure everyone hears about the share sale at the same time. They also mentioned in this press release some loans made by their chairman of the board, which were previously disclosed. This kind of bundling information in a press release is common. An important legal point here: when they say this information isn't filed for certain purposes, it means it's for informational use, like the press release, and doesn't carry the same legal weight or responsibility as the core parts of the filing. It's a way to share news without triggering certain regulatory obligations tied to formal filings. This section is just a list of all the documents attached to this report. Think of it as the table of contents for the supporting documents. Here we see the actual form of the warrant agreement. This document would detail all the exact terms and conditions under which the investor can buy more shares later. This is the big agreement we talked about, the contract for selling the shares and warrant. It contains all the promises and rules of the deal. And here's the agreement that promises to register those shares later, making them easier to sell for the investor. This is the press release they issued to announce all this news. It's the public-facing communication about the transaction. And finally, a digital file for easier computer processing of the report. This is part of newer electronic filing requirements. The filing is signed and dated August 27th, 2025, confirming the date of the events and when this report was officially submitted. And here's the signature. Jane Gottschalk, as president of Perfect Moment Limited, has officially authorized this report. So looking at Perfect Moment Limited and this filing, it's clear they needed to raise some capital. They brought in about $1.8 million by selling over 3.1 million shares and a warrant for more. This isn't unusual for growth companies that might not be generating enough cash from operations to fund their expansion plans. The fact that they used a private placement exemption suggests they wanted to move quickly and perhaps avoid the scrutiny of a full public offering registration. For the investor, X3 Higher Moment Fund LLC, they're getting a stake in the company at a price tied to the recent market value, plus the option to buy more shares later on. The question is, why the need for this capital? Is it for expansion, to cover operational costs, or to address a specific financial gap? Without seeing their broader financial statements, it's hard to say definitively. But this type of financing is often a lifeline. It can be a sign of a company making strategic moves, or it can signal financial pressure. The company's emerging growth company status means they are relatively young, and it's common for such companies to seek external funding. The fact that they agreed to register the shares later is a positive for the investor, as it promises future liquidity. The risks here are that the company might have overpromised, or that their future growth plans don't pan out, making the shares bought today or through the warrant less valuable. If the company struggles, those shares could be worth much less than 0 to 46.8222. Conversely, if Perfect Moment Limited executes well and its stock price soars, this investor is in a great position. Overall, Perfect Moment Limited is making a move to bring in much needed funds. It's a standard financing tool for a company at their stage, but it also highlights that they're likely not self-sustaining yet. Whether this is a smart growth investment or a stopgap measure will be revealed in their future financial reports and their ability to execute their business plan. Alright, that's our breakdown of Perfect Moment Limited's latest filing. What's your take on these numbers and what they signal for the company's future? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this analysis was valuable, hitting that like button really helps, and subscribe for more deep dives. Don't forget to check out the Discord in the description. Thanks for watching. See you next time.